Take a hot cuppa and relax. It's Afternoon Karak with Aisha Al-Mazmi and Mikhail Atiyah
on Pulse 95.
We are only 2 days away from the end of the year, and it's not getting easier. No, it's still very difficult to get used to the fact that 2020 is finally ending, and hopefully all the disasters and all the bad omens and negativity would also end with it. I know this is wishful thinking, but I believe that the more you try to attract good and positive energy, it will eventually come to you. So I am with all these people who keep on repeating that 2021 will be our year. 2021, repeat after me. 2021 will be our year. Welcome to the Afternoon Karak, your coping mechanism for 2020 and hopefully your companion in 2021. Today I'm going to be talking about some of Netflix's most watched TV shows and movies in 2020, because just like how Spotify had a Spotify Wrapped, Netflix has released something similar called What We Watched 2020. And they have done that kind of every single year, where at the end of the year, they talk about the things that were most streamed on the platform. But this year, they've given even more details. Now, this is mostly in the United States, but we can still talk about them. We can discuss, have we also watched the similar things or not? Now we go into some weird stories where a Kentucky man goes viral for clearing his snowy driveway in a very, very innovative and very smart way, because what they always say is work smarter and not harder. We have a rumor, a Marvel Studios rumor, because what is the Afternoon Karak if not, just a bunch of Marvel stories every single day. This is about Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He is well known, everybody knows him, and I love him as well, but do we want to see him in an MCU movie? Is this another big name that is just, thrown around in Marvel Studios, or is it serious? We can talk about that later. And finally, our weekly countdown. Today, we're going to be talking about what is the funniest thing that happened to you in 2020. Yesterday, we were talking about the best thing that you've done or the best decision you have taken in 2020. But this year, we're going to be focusing, today, not this year. Today, we're going to be focusing on anything that made you laugh, anything that you think was the funniest thing that ever happened to you during this year, because God knows we need some funny things and some comedy in our lives every once in a while. Text me 4215 it's Salat or do and join in the conversation. Tell me what is the funniest thing that happened to you in 2020. Coming up next, we have a song from Taylor Swift. It is from her latest album, Evermore. Here is Willow.
Pulse 95.
Back in 2019, most of the news across the world, when they were talking about streaming services, most notably Netflix, a lot of them said that Netflix is not doing quite well. And they reported that their stocks were falling. They reported that they were spending way too much and they were earning. And then a pandemic hits and everybody was stuck at home. And while Netflix saw a reasonable increase in people streaming their movies and their TV shows, and they saw a year-to-year 50% plus growth in their stock, despite the fact that there was a price hike. And usually price hikes would sometimes push people away, and there has been an increase of streaming services with shows and movies that are as attractive as Netflix was advertising. In fact, Mikhail and I always spoke about the fact that Netflix does a very lousy job when it comes to marketing some of their best shows. Sometimes they just talk about a handful of TV shows and movies that everybody, will see on their front page. However, there are so many hidden gems that suddenly get canceled because you never heard of them, because nobody ever watched them, or even some really good TV shows such as Glow, which happens to be one of my favorite Netflix shows, that just get canceled for God knows what reason. And people have been negatively criticizing Netflix for that, and And yet, a lot of people were watching Netflix this year. And on Netflix's What to Watch 2020, one of their most interesting compilations so far, because they've seen some very funny interests happening across the entire platform. They're seeing a lot of funny things that have been happening, such as the company reporting a 50% rise in ratings for home baking shows during March. And I believe that I was one of those people that raised it by at least 25% because I am a massive fan of home baking shows. One of my favorite ones is Sugar Rush. The moment they updated, goodness, I just binge watched the entire thing, or at least try not to finish the entire thing. And right after lockdown measures, they also saw a rise in romantic dramas or comedies because people doubled their watch time watching these genres. And that just shows that, just like I said earlier, people are looking for any sort of getaway, any sort of funny thing, something to uplift them, something to make them a little bit happier. And foreign language titles also saw a 50% increase in popularity in the United States. And this is a reminder, this entire report is based on viewerships and streaming services, Netflix's streaming habits all the way in the United States. So this is not global, but we can kind of guess that we've seen similar things happen throughout the entire world. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of people were also watching romantic comedies and just comedies and baking shows throughout the entire year. At least it's been at an increase lately. And of course, some of the TV shows and movies that were at the spotlight were Tiger King. Yes, it was all the way back in March and April. It was such a long time ago, but Tiger King was one of the most watched TV shows or movies. It's a documentary. You can call it as either. There is also Space Force. If you guys remember that, it was one of the highlights of my year when it comes to Netflix as well. It was quite interesting and quite a fun thing to watch. The Queen's Gambit, Enola Holmes, The Crown, and The Umbrella Academy were also quite popular dramas on Netflix, which again is not a surprise at all. And when we're talking about foreign titles, there was The Platform that I always saw at the front page of my Netflix screen, but I never watched it. And I remember I kind of suggested it to Umnia Saleh from Future Talk and Sama Matar, our chief music operator, and they hated me for that because apparently it was, to say the least, it was quite brutal and very, I'd say 18 plus in terms of violence. And those are just some of the things that people were watching in the United States on Netflix. Text me 4215 Talat Urdu and tell me, what have you guys been watching on Netflix? Have you been showing similar interests, or do you have some niche interests that you were quite addicted to throughout the entirety of 2020 on Netflix? I'll be taking a short break and we're going to be talking about somebody who decided to work smarter and not harder. Stay tuned for that.
Not in the news?
Not in the news. Weirdness that happened
Today.
True story.
What does it mean when they say work smarter and don't work harder? For this guy, Timothy Browning, it's apparently wearing your white bathrobe, socks, slippers, and a hat, and standing in a driveway using a flamethrower to melt down the snow instead of shoveling it out of the driveway. And for that, he deserves a massive round of applause. Because why would you ever go around and shovel snow out of your driveway? Granted, we live in the UAE, we do not have those problems. However, let's pretend we're in a place where we do have a lot of snow. And yeah, I mean, it's very obvious. It's the obvious thing. You use something hot or something warm to melt down the snow instead of sitting around for the next couple of hours trying to shovel snow out of your driveway. Now, of course, the video went viral when one of his relatives filmed him standing on his driveway and doing that, so we had no idea anybody was watching him in the first place. But if I was standing by the window and I see that my neighbor is holding something like a flamethrower, you bet that I will be taking a video of that and just spreading it everywhere. And it just makes me wonder, where did an average man get a flamethrower? As far as I know, flamethrowers are not the kind of thing that you just buy at any sort of supermarket or even, hardware store. I'm pretty sure Ace Hardware or IKEA does not carry flamethrowers. When you think of flamethrowers, you think of either Elon Musk and his, is it a publicity stunt when he was selling those flamethrowers from his company? Not a boring company, I'm not sure what it was called, but the whole thing was kind of weird when he was trying to sell flamethrowers, which again, we don't even know if it actually happened or not, or he was just talking about it on Twitter and just pretending that it's an actual thing that can be purchased. And video games, to be honest, or those really incredibly loud action movies where at some point there is some villain walking around with a massive flamethrower just to get the entirety of the main characters just feel out of place and freaking out, and what do we do? There's a person with a flamethrower. And then at the end of it, they somehow triumph over the guy with the flamethrower. But beyond that, I never thought that any average person can go up and buy a flamethrower. It's just making me wonder, where on earth can you actually get a flamethrower? Not that we need one here in the UAE, because what are we going to melt? We do not have snow, and the weather is incredibly hot anyway, so I don't think it's going to work out here. I think instead of shoveling snow, our problem would be not shoveling, because yes, we do get sandstorms, but not enough that we need to shovel sand out of our driveways, but sweeping dust and sweeping sand out of our driveways maybe. And it's making me wonder, how can we work smarter but not harder when we're trying to sweep sand out of our driveways right here in the UAE? And I'm thinking, can a flamethrower work? I don't think so. That's going to be problematic, especially since it's incredibly hot in the UAE. So it's just going to make everything even hotter, I believe. It's not going to help at all. So I honestly cannot think. Maybe a leaf blower, but that can be counterproductive, especially if it's already windy and everything is just might come back into your face. It might go into somebody's eyes, and that can be another problem you need to deal with. So again, what can we do here in the UAE? If you have a driveway filled with sand from a sandstorm, how can you work smarter and not harder and get rid of all this sand? Text me 4215 with Salat or do. I'd love to hear from you. Coming up next, I'll be talking about a Marvel Studios rumor. A well-known actor, that is Joseph Gordon-Levitt, might be joining the MCU. Stay tuned for that conversation right after this very short break and the sports headlines.
Speculation, gossip, or hoax. Rumor has it.
After Endgame, it was very obvious that the MCU is going to expand in ways that it never had before. And I'd say Endgame kind of cemented the MCU as a massive contender in the world of movies, as a entire universe of characters and, stories and plots, etc. Which is why right after that, a lot of big names started becoming a little bit more interested in the franchise, because at some point the entirety of the MCU comprised of names that were up and coming. They were well known, but they're not as big as names such as Tom Cruise and Leonardo DiCaprio. In fact, everybody knows this, that Chris Evans, for example, Chris Hemsworth, Tom Hiddleston, etc. And all of them were kind of not known, and it was the MCU that kind of put them on the spotlight as some of the biggest actors and actresses in the entirety of Hollywood. Now we're seeing a lot of big names that are showing interest now that we're moving on to the new phase of the MCU. Especially a couple weeks ago, I believe, Mikhail and I spoke about the fact that there were rumors that Leonardo DiCaprio might be in talks to be part of the upcoming phase of the MCU. Now, it was also revealed that we're not kind of sure if anything kind of actually happened, simply because a lot of times what happens is that some sort of executive, some kind of producer might be talking to said actor or actress, but nothing really is happening. It's just them showing them or telling them, are you interested in this role? Would you want to be part of the MCU or not? And them just, having some sort of negotiations or some sort of conversation outside of the scene, underneath the tables with nothing becoming official later on. Now we have another actor who is apparently in talks with a producer or a creative from Marvel Studios, and that is Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who is well known for his many indie films, as well as the Christopher Nolan Batman series, The Dark Knight Rises, and whatnot. Now, of course, no other context was given from Charles Murphy of Murphy's Multiverse, who was well known as a tipster when it comes to the MCU and Marvel Studios. They just said that they're just in talks. And again, it could be one of the creatives just giving them a role and be like, hey, would you be interested in taking on this role? Are you interested in joining the MCU? Maybe, maybe not. Nothing is set in stone. So this begs the question, what exactly do they have in mind? Where can we see Joseph Gordon-Levitt in the MCU? There are many places for him, whether it's some of the newer projects that are coming up very soon, such as Thor Love and Thunder, we have Ant-Man, we have Fantastic Four. He could be in any of those movies, or we can probably see him in the movies that are coming up later on in the next part of the MCU phases, whether it's Captain Marvel 2, Moon Knight, or Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I would love to see him share the screen once again with Christian Bale, because he was with him in the Dark Knight Rises series, and it would be really cool to see them either, together as villains or maybe as contenders against each other. Who knows where we can see Joseph Gordon-Levitt, or if we'll see him in the first place, because again, this is all unofficial and nothing is set in stone. Text me 4215 Talat or do. I would like you to join in the next conversation. We're gonna have a countdown coming up next. We've been counting down the past couple of days all the way towards 2021 by reminiscing about some of the things that have been happening in 2020. We spoke about your worst decisions of 2020. We spoke about the best dishes you ate in 2020. We also spoke about the best decisions you've made in 2020. Now we move on to the funniest things that happened to you in 2020. I have a really funny story. It was on the verge of becoming a disaster, but thank God nothing really happened. And to this day, we just keep on laughing about it. My friends and I, share with me your experiences. I'd love to hear all about them. We do have a question up on our Instagram at Pulse95 Radio, so head down there if you'd like to answer over there. As for now, we're going to be taking a break, and we'll be back with much more right here on the Afternoon Karak.
This is Pulse 95.
So we've been counting down towards 2021 right here on the Afternoon Karak, and we've been asking you questions to reminisce about 2020 and how has that been going for you. I know, don't answer that. I know it's been a disaster for a lot of us, but I'm pretty sure there were some things that are worth remembering, because what is growth if not just, reminiscing and learning from your mistakes and even remembering all the good memories, right? So today we're going to be going towards the good, positive memories, and hopefully some really good ones. And that is the question of the day is, what are some of the funniest things that happened to you in 2020? Now, we do have a question up on our Instagram at Pulse95 Radio. So the question is up there. If you want to reply, you can reply over there or text me 4215 Itsalat Urdu and tell me what is the funniest thing you've done in 2020 or the funniest thing that happened to you in 2020. Either works. Now we have Sheikha who says, my life, and I get it. I understand. Honestly, I felt that as well, because a lot of times we feel that, when nothing goes right, everything is just going wrong, and you just sit down and you just laugh about your life and the way this life is taking you, the direction it is taking you. But you know what? At least you're laughing. That is, I say that is the silver lining out of having a very funny life. As for me, now this, I'll take you all the way back to January. I believe it was the beginning of January. So the pandemic did not even hit yet. We were still in our lovely bubbles back then. And my lovely, lovely friend and I had been planning an outing for several weeks now, if not a couple of months. Now, the first time we were supposed to go, what happened is that we had a really, really, really bad thunderstorm. There was a lot of rain. If you guys remember back in January, the first couple of weeks, it was a lot of things were happening in the weather. It was kind of crazy. It was nice, but at the same time, it kind of ruined our outing. So because of that, we moved the outing to the next week. We were supposed to plan a picnic and everything was set, and I was supposed to be it was my idea, so I got all the picnic basket ready and every single thing ready. I was ready to go. I was good to go. My friends were good to go. Finally, wake up early in the morning. We leave around 7 a.m. We get to the place at 8 a.m. We start setting up the entire area. We are super excited. We're good to go. Now we're just setting up the portable stove. And well, the thing is, it was my first time ever trying to operate it, and I've tried it out at home and it was perfectly fine. And I had got a new one, and I also took my mom's portable stove. And I should have been paying attention, because the moment we inserted the gas canister, it started leaking. And obviously it made a sound and of some things leaking out of the canister. That should have been a sign for us. That should have been somebody going okay, move away from the stove. But my really good friend and I were no, let's just work it out, guys. The canister is in. Let's light up the stove. And it kind of lit up right in front of us. The entire stove lit up. And I know, yes, this does not sound funny, but we're going to get to it eventually. Next thing we know is me just standing up, and my friend jumps right into the lake that's right in front of us. And my other friends were just kind of, in shock. And we're trying to put out the fire. And luckily, somebody from the municipality was next to us, and they managed to push it into the lake and told us off, obviously. And it took us a good minute or two before we just started laughing. It was a disaster. It was traumatic up until this day. I cannot sit in front of any sort of portable stove because I'm just too terrified. In fact, last week we had to barbecue some burgers and we used the portable stove, and it was the same group of friends, and you guys should have seen how terrified we were of just lighting it up. We were just so scared, but at least this time it went better than last time. And it was just a very funny thing. At that moment we were laughing. We were terrified, but we were laughing, and we're also incredibly hungry because it was 8 a.m. and most of our breakfast depended on that stove. And we even went and bought another one and came back, and we barely managed to insert the gas canister again, and we were terrified. And we heard the leak again, and we were just okay, no more stoves. We will just eat whatever we have. We will get through this. We do not care. And it became one of the most memorable parts of 2020. Despite the pandemic, all of my friends and I, all of us remember collectively the day where we nearly set each other on fire. Again, it's traumatic. You do have You could easily call it PTSD symptoms from just looking at a stove and just looking at gas canisters for a couple of days. I'm not even kidding. Every time I passed by the gas canisters in the supermarket, I would get my heart to start thumping in my chest, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go past this really fast because it was scary. But at the end of the day, it was one of the funniest things that happened to me in 2020. And with that, we end our segment right here on the Afternoon Karak because we need to make way for Big Hass and Anna Schofield, who were going to be your companions from 5 p.m. all the way till 8 p.m. The countdown on the Afternoon Karak continues tomorrow and the day after as we near closer and closer to 2021. So I hope you guys have a lovely day and make sure you are staying tuned to Pulse 95.
If you liked this episode of Afternoon Karak, drop a like and subscribe.
Pulse 95.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram for all our daily updates and top stories.